Did Caesar really cross over this bridge with his fear of heights? The Vertigo Bridge on the River Hangover Tiebreaker is next. Welcome to the Greatest Movie of All Time podcast, the show that uses a unique grading style to redefine what the greatest movies are. I'm Tom Duncan.
And I'm Dana Duncan. Madness.
Okay, Mr. Donald here. James Donald, to be accurate. And I think the only other movie I can recall him in is The Great Escape, right? He was in that. Was he not?
He was in that.
Okay. I thought I had that right. Okay.
I'd have to look.
It's only 6 years apart. It would make sense that he was in another war film.
That much I know, but I'm trying to remember if I saw him in anything else.
Oh, well, you don't need to do the research right now. I mean, it's weird to be on your phone while we're recording the middle of a podcast.
So, go ahead. It's fine.
Some level of engagement from you would be...
That's fine. I'm engaged.
You haven't been engaged since, 1987.
Yeah, shush.
Okay. Tonight, for our 313th episode, we once again return to break a tie, this time between David Lean's A Bridge on the River Kwai from 1957, Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo from 1958, and Todd Phillips's The Hangover from 2009. Dad, what do you remember, if anything, about any of these episodes?
I was there.
Okay. Anything else?
The bridge, I did my little song.
Yes, you did. That was season 1, episode number 37, and that was October 14th, 2020.
Yeah.
Now, Vertigo, for what it's worth, you bought some little, I don't know, it's not a chalkboard, it's some type of erase board. And Vertigo has been featured as the movie on that board since June 7th, 2023.
Your mother pointed that out.
3 years ago, and we have not yet returned to it until tonight. I gotta say, it's been a long time since season 4. That seems like not that long ago that we covered this movie, but still, almost 3 years. That's a long time. And also, roughly the same time the following year, The Hangover was, I think, the first episode that we did full video, and it was just you and I that week. So it was June 5th, 2024. So we've been doing video for almost 2 years.
Yeah, time flies. I say that every time I look in a mirror.
Yeah, I suppose that's probably true. Age comes for us all. Father Time is undefeated.
Yes.
But let alone, we did cover all 3 of these movies in entirely different years in entirely different ways, and the format of the show has changed rather significantly. When I went back to start putting together the Bridge on the River Kwai notes, we had nothing for the recognition section, or very little involvement for that. We hadn't done the multiple different scenes. It was just us deciding on one scene together. It's very different. So if you do go back to listen to any of these episodes, and to be fair, and I'm usually very harsh and critical on our ability to go back in time, particularly to the early part of season 1, by episode 37, we'd started to figure it out a little bit more. The recording quality's not nearly as good. I'll admit that. I'll be one of the first people to admit that. But some of the later ones in that back half, by the time we get to 37, I think we were doing a much better job. We'd kind of figured out the energy of the show, and things have definitely changed since that point. But it was at least a quality effort show. Even if you're not going to get a full redux on the Bridge on the River Kwai yet, it's still going to be discussed fairly heavily tonight, but much more in a Stanley Rubric context than I think we probably did back when we did this original episode. And I'll have to admit, I know we're just simply breaking the tie, and so as we go tonight, we're not giving them new scores or anything else, But I think each one of these films would be scored differently if we did it tonight than we did when we originally did the episodes.
Yes, I think so too. I mean, a couple of these scores I looked at and I'm like, yeah. But, okay.
So without further ado, let's go through the recognition for the first film, and we're just going to go in chronological order. So 1957, we have The Bridge on the River Kwai. Cast for that film, David Lean, director. Carl Foreman and Michael Wilson were the writers. Jack Hilliard, cinematography. Peter Taylor, editing. Malcolm Arnold, music. William Holden as Commander Shears. Alec Guinness as Colonel Nicholson. Jack Hawkins as Major Warden. Sesu Hayakawa, I think it is, as Colonel Saito, James Donald as Major Clipton, Jeffrey Horn as Lieutenant Joyce, Andre Morell as Colonel Green, Peter Williams as Captain Reeves, and John Boxer as Major Hughes. Recognition for the movie, The Bridge on the River Kwai was released on December 14th, 1957. On a budget between $2.4 to $2.8 million, the film would gross roughly $30.6 million to finish as the far and away #1 film of 1957, both domestic and abroad. Critics were effusive in their praise for the film at the time, and The Bridge on the River Kwai would go on to be nominated for 8 Oscars that year, including Sesu Hayakawa as Best Supporting Actor, while winning for Best Picture, Director for David Lean, Actor for Alec Guinness, Screenplay, Cinematography, Editing, and Original Score. In 1997, the film was selected for preservation in the National Film Registry. In 1999, the British Film Institute voted The Bridge on the River Kwai the 11th greatest British film of the 20th century. I guess it somehow falls into both American and British film somehow, but okay, fair enough. The film has been recognized by the AFI on the following lists. AFI's 100 Years, 100 Movies at number 13. AFI's 100 Years, 100 Thrills in 2001 at number 58. AFI's 100 Years, 100 Cheers from 2006 at number 14, and their redo list, the 10th anniversary edition of 100 Years, 100 Movies in 2007 at number 36. The Bridge on the River Kwai currently holds a 96% among critics on Rotten Tomatoes, an 88 score on Metacritic, and a 4.2 out of 5 on Letterboxd. Now, do you have a plot summary ready for us?
I do. In The Bridge on the River Kwai, a British colonel, Alec Guinness, and his regiment are marched into a Japanese POW camp deep in the Burmese jungle, where the suffocating heat, rigid military pride, and the demands of their captors collide. As the Japanese command insists the prisoners build a strategic bridge across the River Kwai, a quiet but mounting tension takes hold. Between duty and defiance, honor and obsession, survival and the slow erosion of self. The film unfolds as an atmospheric study of men locked in a battle of wills, each convinced he's serving a greater purpose, even as the jungle hums with the sense that something far larger is closing in.
Thank you, Dad. The Bridge on the River Kwai, the Stanley Rubric from that original episode from 2020. Legacy was a 9.25. Impact and Significance was a 9.5. Novelty, which we've completely overhauled since then, is a 7.75. Classicness a 6.5. Rewatchability a 5.25. And Audience Score a 9.3. For a total of 47.55, which, to be quite honest, is what all 3 of these films will have. That's why we're doing a tiebreaker tonight. So let's pause here before we move on to our next film and just generally revisiting the film after 6 years, or I guess 5.5 years. Anything new that stuck out to you this time watching the film? Anything that you want to say about the Stanley Rubric? Just, I'll open up the floor for you.
Well, I watched the film again, and every time I see the film, and this is probably the 4th or 5th time I've seen it, I'm struck about how well it holds up and how good it actually is. I think it is a true classic, and I think David Lean really did do a masterful job of dealing with a large set. I know that in previous research, and I confirm this again, that they actually blew the bridge up and crashed the train.
Yeah.
And this, from what I understand, remnants of the train still are in the river.
That sounds about right.
They never cleaned it up. They didn't have to. Nobody cared.
I think that's the same thing that we discussed earlier this year when we talked about Buster Keaton's The General. Anything else?
I guess if I were to go back and say the novelty score to me was too low because we take into account execution, and I think the execution would have been much higher. I also think it's much more classic than we originally gave it credit for. So, but by the same token, I think it's a film that I want to watch, but I think it's probably not a cycle watch for me. It'll be something I put on every 4 or 5 years and without a problem, maybe even longer. But not going to be in my list of things I'm going to go back to on a regular basis.
This is not a film that I return to terribly often. I probably do it every 2 to 3 years. I've seen it, I think, at least once, if not twice, since we watched it for this episode. And frankly, it comes at a good time because I'm supposed to be at least getting through some level of preparation for an episode of Oscars redo for 1957. And I hadn't gotten this one off my list yet, so it actually accomplished 2 goals in that capacity. But the cinematography, the production design, the scale for this era of film, and I understand that this was an era of film where we were starting to get larger and larger productions going on. You had Giant, you had Around the World in 80 Days, and no matter what you think about that film, just the scale, the amount of set design, the on-location viewing, it was starting to skew in that direction. But I feel like this film takes it to a different level. And much in the same way that Lawrence of Arabia takes yet another step, I feel, in the amount of set design and cinematography and editing from a production and film quality standpoint. I think from a technical design, this film is immaculate. It's the one thing that I could really hold it up against something like, from the same year, 12 Angry Men. I think that is found to be almost universally thought of as a more profound film, particularly for Americans. But I think while both films are exceptional, it's why I think either this or the year 1959 were my 2 top years when we did our individual film years, and both of those finished as my top 2. Why I feel like this is an exceptional film year. Because I think that this movie, at times I felt is boring. For this time, I was riveted. I don't know why. And why it has such this dueling fates where I have difficulty with it one time and then I don't another time. It's kind of odd to me that way. But I would definitely think that some of our scoring would change in different ways. I think the rewatchability is likely to have changed, classicness, novelty. I think even the legacy might change just slightly with how we're reformatting it now 6 years later.
Well, I think that this is a film that, as time has gone by, is falling more out of favor with the general public. When I was a kid, everybody knew the film. And when it was on television, it was a major event.
Well, to be fair, you were born 6 years after this movie came out. So it's not like it would be the equivalent of Die Hard almost being a big movie when I was growing up and people knew what it was.
Well, I understand, but I mean, there were still a lot of the vets who were alive. One of my neighbors had been as part of the Bataan Death March. And so, I mean, I always wondered, because I would go over to his house until my dad got home from work, because I was smaller yet. And he would, anytime a commercial for Toyota or Datsun or would come on, he would just start swearing, and his wife would be yelling at him to knock it off when the kid's present. And then if I found out why. But, yeah, so
this was released 12 years after the war finished. It's very much if we had a contemporary retelling of, let's say, the Iraq War, 12 years, even a decade following it. And we've had several movies that came out very shortly thereafter that talked about this in some level of detail. The one I think most people would point to is The Hurt Locker, because that was only a couple of years. In fact, the Iraq War was still ongoing when that won Best Picture. But yeah, that makes a lot of sense that it would be in living memory and be about an event. While I think the story is fictitious as far as I can tell, it still at least lives in enough memory, has enough groundings in reality that I think, yes, it makes sense that it was popular at the time. What I would say is, as far as why it's waned out of favor, it's just a long movie. And I don't know if the attention span is there right now in our ADHD, small video, vertical video world that is, everything is moving at 2 minutes a clip, basically, to watch a 2.5 hour film, unless you're seated in the theater. And I just don't know what theaters are going to be playing this on a regular basis.
When I did trial work years ago, I knew that commercial breaks were every 8 minutes. And so I would time out my questioning on subjects, and then every 8 minutes I'd pause and change direction or change topic. I might come back later to the same topic if I had more examination, but I never went more than 8 minutes because jurors were used to having a pause and then having to change what they were doing because that was the attention span. I don't know how you would go about doing a trial now.
Well, I guess we'll find out, because I think I start criminal litigation skills next week.
Yeah. I have no idea. I don't know how jurors are going to be paying attention to what's going on. Unless you think or present it like you're doing forensic files or something.
Could be. So let's move on to our next film of the evening. That is Vertigo, which we covered approximately 3 years ago. The cast for this is Alfred Hitchcock as the director, Alec Koppel and Samuel Taylor as the writers, Robert Burks as the cinematographer, Bernard Herrmann for music, George Tomasini for editing, James Stewart as John Scotty Ferguson, Kim Novak as Judy Barton / Madeline Elster, Tom Helmore as Gavin Elster, Barbara Bel Geddes as Marjorie Midge Wood, Henry Jones as the coroner, Raymond Bailey as Scotty's doctor, Ellen Corby as the manager of the McKittrick Hotel, and Constantine Shane as the bookstore owner Pop Liebel. Recognition for Vertigo, loosely based on I'm going to butcher this so badly, D'Entre les Morts, a 1954 novel by Pierre Boileau, let's try it that way, Boileau, and Thomas Narsajak. This is so bad. Vertigo was released on May 9th, 1958. While Vertigo did break even upon its original release, it earned significantly less than other Hitchcock productions, and finished an estimated 13th among top-grossing films in 1958. Adding to the comparatively low box office numbers were the mixed to poor reviews at the time, with many critics singling out the pacing and structure of the story, as well as Hitchcock's departure from the romantic thrillers he had become known for. In an interview with Francois Truffaut, Hitchcock stated that Vertigo was one of his favorite films, with some reservations. He blamed the film's failure on the 49-year-old Stewart looking too old to play a convincing love interest for the 24-year-old Kim Novak. Over time, however, the film has been reevaluated by film critics and has moved higher in esteem in most critics' opinion. Every 10 years since 1952, the BFI Institute, or the British Film Institute's film magazine Sight and Sound, has asked the world's leading film critics to compile a list of the 10 greatest films of all time. In the 1962 and 72 polls, Vertigo was not among the top 10 films in voting. Only in 1982 did Vertigo enter the list, and then it placed 7th. By 1992, it had advanced to 4th place, by 2002 to 2nd, and in 2012 to 1st place in both the crime genre and overall, ahead of Citizen Kane in 2nd place. In 2022, the Sight and Sound poll ranked Vertigo 2nd place. In the 2012 Sight and Sound Directors Poll of the greatest films ever made, Vertigo was ranked 7th. In the earlier 2002 version of the list, the film ranked 6th among directors. In the 2022 edition of the list, the film ranked 6th in the director's poll. In 1998, Time Out conducted a poll, and Vertigo was voted the 5th greatest film of all time. The Village Voice ranked Vertigo at number 3 in its top 250 best films of the century list in 1999. Entertainment Weekly voted it the 19th greatest film of all time in 1999. In January 2002, the film was voted at number 96 on the list of the top 100 essential films of all time by the National Society of Film Critics. In 2009, the film was ranked at number 10 on Japanese film magazine Kinema Junpo's top 10 non-Japanese films of all time list. In 2022, the Time Out magazine ranked the film at number 15 on their list of the 100 best thriller films of all time. In 1989, Vertigo was selected by the United States Library of Congress for preservation in the National Film Registry in the first year of its registry voting. The American Film Institute has recognized the film on the following lists: 100 Years, 100 Movies in 1998 at number 61, 100 Years, 100 Thrills in 2001 at number 18, 100 Years, 100 Passions in 2002 at number 18, 100 Years of Film Scores in 2005 at number 12, AFI's 100 Years, 100 Movies 10th Anniversary Edition in 2007 at number 9, and AFI's 10 Top 10 in 2008 as the number 1 mystery film of all time. Vertigo currently holds a 92% among critics on Rotten Tomatoes, a 100 score on Metacritic, and a 4.2 out of 5 on Letterboxd. And you have a plot summary ready for us on this.
I do. In Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo, James Stewart stars as Scotty Ferguson, a former detective burdened by his fear of heights, a phobia that gradually becomes a metaphor for the vertiginous nature of desire itself. When Scotty is enlisted by an old acquaintance, Gavin Elster, to investigate his wife's peculiar behavior, the stage is set for a tale of passion and deception. Kim Novak, a vision of ethereal beauty, portrays Madeline, the object of Scotty's infatuation. As Scotty becomes entangled in a torrid affair, the film takes a dark and unexpected turn. The boundaries between truth and illusion blur, leaving both the protagonist and the audience teetering on the edge of a precipice.
Thank you, Dad. The original Stanley Rubric scoring for this one on our episode from almost 3 years ago, Legacy was an 8.25, Impact and Significance was a 5.75, Novelty a 9.5, Classicness an 8.25, Rewatchability a 7, which I find interesting, and Audience Score an 8.8 for a final total of 47.55. So, we'll open up the floor here. What are your initial thoughts returning to Vertigo?
I've been a huge Hitchcock fan most of my life. First Hitchcock film I saw was my freshman year of college. I saw the 39 Steps and have slowly watched most of his films. There are a few that I have not been able to finish or get through yet. The Trouble with Harry is one of them that I keep saying I need to sit down and watch. But the thing about this one is this has never been one that's really grabbed me, that I've never really enjoyed as much. And I had to stop, and I've always often wondered why this one, who most people think is one of his greatest or is a masterpiece. It was great as far as camera work, the color, the cinematography, the shots and angles, all of that. The directing was wonderful. The story leaves me flat. I don't think it has great suspense. I think it's boring at times. And Hitchcock can say what he wants about, the fact that he can blame Stewart's age or looking old all he wants. I just don't think that the public, or 58 public, of the United States at that time was that into some sort of psychological thriller where there wasn't really a build-up. You knew what happened or how it all took place 3/4 of the way through the film. And then you spend the last half an hour trying to figure out how it's going to end, and there's really no suspense to it, per se. And I guess that's why I have a lot of problems with this. I understand why, based upon all the camera work and everything else, but I think Hitchcock did so many other films that had a lot of the same basic directorial flares as this. Maybe not as many, but the story and the underlying story itself were much more entertaining and much more within the style that Hitchcock presented and the public seemed to gravitate towards.
I'm going to agree and disagree with several different parts of what you said. One, I think that the reason that this elevates above certain other Hitchcock films for critics is it is made differently. The reason it falls flat with you is you have a very famous and noted difficulty with abstract concepts. This is the most abstract Hitchcock film that there is, period. The rest of them are very easily plotted. They're much easier to follow. They're more generally entertaining because of that. This is much more ethereal and flighty and aesthetic in nature. And so most of what the film is about is taking place for the viewer through a visual lens that is subtle as opposed to anything that is plot driven. This is not necessarily a plot heavy movie. And as such, I think that's why you have difficulty with it. At times, I have difficulty with it. I think this is a movie I appreciate more than I love because I can appreciate all the technical mastery and how he was presenting the film, but it just doesn't turn in me a certain satisfaction, catharsis in me as an audience member in the way that several of these other films do. Notably, North by Northwest, Psycho, I think are better examples. Rope, even, has a certain level of catharsis that I just don't get from this film. That's nothing to say that it couldn't be somewhat entertaining, and I think there are people that enjoy it, but it's just, it leaves me a little bit cold from that end where I just can't emotionally involve myself in the story. Whereas a lot of his other films are the everyman caught in a random circumstance. A journalist photographer has a broken leg and he all of a sudden starts spying on his neighbors and discovers a crime. Or man goes on a trip with his family, all of a sudden learns a secret he shouldn't and his son gets kidnapped. Or guy gets mistaken for a spy and all of a sudden gets caught up in a larger ring of potential destruction and national secrets. All of these are the average guy. And while James Stewart is an average guy in this movie is anything but the average guy just having a certain level of circumstances happen to him.
I agree with a lot of that. Maybe that is partly why I have such difficulty with this, is it's not as concrete as I generally like. But I mean, there are films that are not done the same way that I liked better. For example, Strangers on a Train, Notorious. Both are films that I would rank above Vertigo. And neither of those are within the same general arc that Hitchcock became well known and famous for. But there was a tension building throughout the film. This, I just never felt that tension. It just kind of, you're just watching him kind of get through. And I know that Hitchcock is a firm believer that dialogue is only there for the purpose of advancing the story when the visual couldn't. And the fact that you spend a large portion of this time watching Stewart observe is Hitchcockian in and of itself, but it's not really. There's a voyeuristic element to it that Hitchcock is famous for. Other than that, I just don't see the point necessarily of him following her when he sees her again. There's just too many things in this that, to me, just do not really advance the story for me.
Okay. I think there's a big difference between some of the top movies of his oeuvre and even some of the middle brow movies. We've given this a little bit of respect by having it sitting at, I think it's tied 116. All three of these films are tied for 116 right now in our general list. And despite our hesitancy with the movie overall, as far as a score on our graded list, Vertigo ranks number 4 out of the 11 films of his that we've covered so far. The Man Who Knew Too Much, Rope, Dial M for Murder, Shadow of a Doubt, The Birds, The Lady Vanishes, Sabotage are all below that. The only 3 that rank higher are ranked over 100 spots higher. We have 3 films of his inside our top 11, and Vertigo is not one of them. North by Northwest currently sits at number 6, Rear Window at number 8, and Psycho at 11. I think our reverence for him is high, but those are much easier entry points, much more entertaining films, and I think that point has probably been made, or I would hope that point has been made.
I think that's true, because if I'm trying to introduce somebody to Hitchcock, I'm not starting out with Vertigo.
No.
I'm starting out with either North by Northwest or Rear Window.
I don't even think I would start him with North by Northwest. Boy, that's a good question to ask as potentially like a
Rebecca?
social media. No, that one's got so much other stuff going on in it. What is the best set of films to start somebody on Hitchcock on? It's a good question.
Dial M?
Dial M would probably be a good one. I honestly think Psycho would be an easy one. If you're a horror fan, and going back to that, it makes a lot of sense. I think Rope is easy enough to understand, but Vertigo is probably like 15 down that list. Like, you're getting to all the big ones before you get to Vertigo, because you need to see almost like the full machinations of everything that he did as a director to understand what he was going for in order to get to the point where you kind of understand generally what this film is about. So then that moves us to our last film of the evening. That would be The Hangover from 2009. We covered this roughly 2 years ago in 2024. 2024. The Hangover cast includes Todd Phillips as the director, John Lucas and Scott Moore as the writers, Lawrence Sher as the cinematographer, Deborah Neal Fisher in editing, Christoph Beck for music, Bradley Cooper as Phil, Ed Helms as Stu, Zach Galifianakis as Alan, Justin Bartha as Doug, Heather Graham as Jade, Sasha Bareilles as Tracy, Jeffrey Tambor as Sid, Ken Jeong as Mr. Chow, Rachel Harris as Melissa, Mike Tyson as himself, Mike Epps as Black Doug, Matt Walsh as Dr. Walsh, okay, Rob Riggle as Officer Franklin, Cleo King as Officer Garden, and Brian Callen as Eddie. Recognition for The Hangover. The Hangover was wide released on June 5th, 2009. On a budget of $35 million, the film would go on to gross $469.3 million worldwide and become the number 6 grossing film in the United States in 2009. It was also the highest grossing R-rated comedy until Deadpool 7 years later in 2016. Out of all R-rated films, it is the 6th highest grossing film ever in the United States, behind The Passion of the Christ, Deadpool, American Sniper, It, and The Matrix Reloaded. The film was mildly popular among the critics, with some outright panning it, but it would go on to be included in the AFI's Top 10 Films of 2009, receiving numerous nominations among critics' circles and award circuits for its editing, screenplay, and for Best Comedy of the Year. The film's impact was also felt in several other places. It was reported in 2013 that as of that year, guests were still continuing to quote to Caesar's staff 2 lines from the film's check-in scene. Did Caesar live here? And do you know if the hotel is pager-friendly? As a result of the film, hangover-themed slot machines became popular at casinos throughout the Las Vegas Valley. The Caesars Palace gift shop sold tens of thousands of hangover-related souvenirs, and the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority received numerous inquiries from persons interested in recreating some of the film's most wild scenes, such as those involving a tiger. The Las Vegas branch of Madame Tussauds added hangover-themed rooms recreating the hotel room and the wedding chapel, and a tie-in rooftop cocktail bar. And in 2018, Hasbro issued a parody version of their board game Clue, where players have to locate a missing friend somewhere in the city after a wild night of carousing. The film's success would spark 2 sequels in 2011 and 2013 as well. The Hangover currently holds a 79% among critics on Rotten Tomatoes, a 73 score on Metacritic, and a 3.7 out of 5 on Letterboxd. Do you have our plot summary ready?
I do. The Hangover is a raucous comedy that transforms a bachelor party into a riotous odyssey of misadventures. The film opens with 4 friends heading to Las Vegas for a night of celebration, only to wake up the next morning with no memory of the previous night's events. What follows is a frenetic quest to piece together their fragmented memories and locate their missing groom.
Thank you. The Stanley rubric for The Hangover was 8.5 for Legacy, a 9.25 for Impact and Significance, a 7.75 for Novelty, a 7.25 for Classicness, a 6.25 for Rewatchability, and an 8.55 for Audience Score, giving us a total of 47.55. Of course, tying it with both The Bridge on the River Kwai and Vertigo. Now, I'll open up the floor yet again. What do you want to say about The Hangover a couple of years on?
First time I watched it, I thought it was just absolutely wonderful. The way it was put together, the non-linear story. I thought it was just wonderful, okay? Second time I watched it, still thought it was funny, enjoyed it. Third time, well, okay. Now the fourth time I've watched it, I think I'm done watching it for a while. It may be a decade or more before I want to go back. It just sits at this point in time. The novelty's worn off, and it's a lot of strange, cheap humor. You know, Ken Jeong running around naked.
I don't know if it's cheap humor, per se. Galifianakis is on one during this film.
Well, of course. Galifianakis, in and of himself, is just phenomenal. I think he's...
And if you did not see the news, and I may be breaking this to you right now live on the air, they are doing a prequel Young Frankenstein TV series on FX, produced by Mr. Melvin Kaminsky, at least in part, or like by name recognition. He probably just licensed it and allowed them to do it, but starring one Zach Galifianakis. In what role? I have no idea.
Okay.
I think he'd be a good Igor.
Yeah, I'm there.
Okay. Just saying. Apparently revisiting all the old Mel Brooks comedies of the 70s and 80s is now in vogue. We've done History of the World Part 1. We've got a Spaceballs 2 coming. He's revisiting his own stuff. Why not? I just want to see who has the balls to take on Blazing Saddles. Yeah. Anyway, I would agree with you. There is a little bit of humor to it where I can still enjoy it and have a good time watching it, but the laugh out loud moments just are not there because you can basically telegraph them all. I know they're all coming. I know the lines before they're basically even said. It's fine. I know how the sausage is made, and it's still entertaining, and I find fun in watching it, but it's not the same. You cannot go back and put the genie in the bottle. The first time watching it will always be a fond memory for me, but that's always what it's going to be. It is a first watch film that steadily just declines with each reviewing.
I mean, it's still great to have a chance to see Heather Graham, Wisconsin's own Heather Graham.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. She's still getting it done. She's like 51 or 52 now. I just happened to see a current picture of her. She still looks damn stunning.
I don't think, though, that of any of the three that we've discussed so far tonight, this is the least likely, and yes, it was the most recent of the three that we've talked about, but this is the least likely that I think would move in any of our scoring.
It might go down a little bit, and I think part of that's going to be rewatchability and classicness, because there's some parts of this that I'm not sure about.
Classicness, we already... I guess 2 years ago we would have had it at basically a baseline when we were still doing a 7. We got it to a 7.25. It would probably move down a little bit. I don't think the rewatchability changes all that much, because if we're going on an objective scoring, 6.25 is not that high for some of the scores that we've had in rewatchability before, and it's a comedy. Are you really going to tell me that a comedy is unrewatchable when you constantly complain and say, well, I tend to gravitate more towards comedies, and then you're going to grade this one down? Really? Really?
Really?
Okay. Yeah. But anyway, let's move forward here. We'll get to the actual tiebreaker rankings when we come back from our first break. Before we jump back into the episode, next week for our 314th episode, we discuss The Rock from 1996, celebrating its 30th anniversary. Directed by Michael Bay, written by David Weisberg, Douglas S. Cook and Mark Rossner. Cinematography by John Schwartzman. Music by Nick Glennie Smith and Hans Zimmer. Editing by Richard Francis Bruce. Starring Sean Connery, Nicolas Cage, Ed Harris, and David Morse. You won't want to miss that one, so watch ahead of the show by searching the Real Good app to find where it's streaming for you. That's REELGOOD. Okay, we left off at the point at which we were going to start talking about the actual tie-breaking. So, Legacy has changed, at least for one of these films and how we've generally discussed it. I don't believe in Season 1 we had split the category yet between the audience and the industry for a total of 10, 5 and 5 points apiece. So, the way that we judged Vertigo and then The Hangover may be different than how we judged Bridge on the River Kwai at the time. And so I guess for you, I'll open this up with the opening salvo. How would you have these ranked, thinking about how we're doing this now?
We're going to be pretty close, even on Legacy. We might be down just a tad, simply because I think the knowledge of the film is fading over time.
What are you talking about?
Well, I think that every year that goes by, fewer and fewer people are conscious of the film.
Which one of the films are you talking about? You're talking about them one generally, and I'm saying we need to rank them. What are your rankings here for all three? All three.
Okay, because I thought we were starting out with the Bridge.
No, we're not redoing each of the rankings.
Okay. If I had to... So we're just saying 1, 2, and 3?
Yes. That's how we've done every tiebreaker.
It's exactly alphabetically. It's Bridge, Vertigo, Hangover.
Okay, Hangover is most definitely last. Let's start there. But Vertigo is above Bridge. Pure and simple. From a critical standpoint on an industry level, I think people put Vertigo much higher than they do Bridge. And if you've asked people in a modern sense, like let's say you watch we're going to go ask a 30-year-old cinephile right now, the likelihood that they've seen Vertigo is, to me, significantly higher than that they've seen The Bridge on the River Kwai. Period.
Probably.
Full stop. So if that's the case, I think Bridge is 2 and Hangover is a clear 3rd. Any further discussion, or you
no,
okay with that?
You're entitled to your opinion. I guess I would agree with you. I know for me, I don't agree with it. I gave you my opinion on it. But
well, this is a debate show.
You do make more sense.
Okay. All right. So that officially then would be Vertigo 1, The Bridge on the River Kwai 2, The Hangover at 3. Now, moving to impact and significance, again, we didn't really apply the same standard to The Bridge on the River Kwai that we did to the other two films. I think Vertigo in this category falls by the wayside. in the moment where it was made, in the point at where critics were analyzing it as it came out, even Hitchcock analyzing his own movie, felt it was a massive failing. It was not critically acclaimed. It was not box office successful in the way that the other two films were. But what I would say is The Bridge on the River Kwai was by far and away the number one film of the year. Huge box office appeal, both
Correct.
publicly, and then it wins the Oscar. Something that only, I think, a handful of films have done, which is be the number one film of the given year and win Best Picture. With that being the case, I would have Bridge 1, Hangover 2, Vertigo 3 here.
I guess I can't find fault with you on that because it does make sense. Because, I mean, The Hangover made a huge amount of money. It was highly popular among the public in general.
It had a lot of cultural impact in the moment.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it really made all three. Well, Ed Helms, excuse me. Ed Helms has not really
Ed Harris
had,
and Ed Helms are
yeah. Well, it's what happens when you
people.
start watching The Rock first. So,
Yeah, that's fair.
yeah. I just don't think it has, or he's had quite the career that the other two have had. But considering how much money they probably made, what difference does it make? He's made several films. He's done a lot of voice-overs or voice acting in animated films. I'm sure he's not hurting for money, and so he doesn't have to work real hard.
Bradley Cooper being the executive producer on A Star Is Born and all of the attachments that come with that, being the voice of the raccoon in Guardians of the Galaxy, and then being a part of the Avengers movies, and then being in the Hangover movies, like, Bradley Cooper's doing fine. And Galifianakis probably made a decent enough nest egg that he could go and do his weird little side projects, and he could do Between Two Ferns, and now he can do Young Frankenstein, and he could do that one weird FX show about clowns or something. Like, nobody's hurting here. Not to mention, Todd Phillips is the EP on this movie, gets it directed, and then goes out and makes Joker later. That's $1 billion movie. I don't think anybody did that poorly. But even from that standpoint, on a critical analysis, and that's the thing that I would put this over the top, where Bridge on the River Kwai doing $30.6 million, and I think the next highest grossing film was like 15, so doing 2 times what the second finishing film in a particular year did, and the cultural impact that that made, and then winning director, picture, and actor, that's just something that's they can hold over The Hangover in perpetuity on this category.
Yes.
For me. So that's Bridge 1, Hangover 2, Vertigo 3. All right, then we move to novelty rankings here. This is another category that I think even since we did The Hangover has changed. Because I don't think we were formally giving execution points. It may have been part of the factors, but I don't think we were splitting this category at the time that we last reviewed any of these films. And so that being said, I don't know if I have a preconceived notion that easily delineates between these 3 films as far as their status. If I were to give a soft ranking, I think I have Vertigo 1 because it's the most abstract. It's the most unlike anything else in the space that I can think of. It has probably, on a technical level, well, that being said, on an execution and a technical level, I don't know if it passes Bridge. I think Bridge and Vertigo might be both pretty close to 5 on an execution level. So then you're looking at, is this movie unlike anything else? And I guess where I would separate that is maybe Vertigo is just different.
It basically was the first psychological thriller.
I mean, The Night of the Hunter was before that.
I guess. And for that matter, Gaslit.
Gaslight? Okay.
Yeah. So,
Well, and there are plenty of other Hitchcock movies I think you could point to and say, this has got enough psychological elements to it. Suspicion? Rebecca?
yeah.
I just think that for somebody that was known for a particular formula and based his brand on entertainment value, this is a movie, even among his own collection, that is just different. As far as I can tell, David Lean made 3 very big movies that were all very similar. Zhivago, Lawrence of Arabia, and Bridge on the River Kwai. All historical epics, all shot very similarly with high production values and great acting.
Mm-hmm.
And while Vertigo is a suspicion film, it's just, I don't know how to put my finger on it. I feel like it's just different. The Hangover does have some level of novelty, but I don't think we're discussing it nearly in the same class as these other 2 films.
I'd have to agree on that. The problem I have is and again, this is the problem the Academy generally has, is they have a tendency to not consider or take comedy seriously as far as their technical aspects.
Okay. I think we've placed comedy in a better light if the jokes remain classic, but that's the different category. I don't know what... At the time that this was released, it felt fresh, it felt novel, but compared to 2 older films that are just some of the all-time classics, it feels like it's at a significant disadvantage.
Yeah, and it's more recent, so the registry of time is not with it.
Correct.
So I have a feeling that in another 10 to 15 years, it's going to fall even further behind as far as the value this film has.
Well, what I would also like to flip a little bit in here is the simple fact that I don't think we're discounting comedy generally. I think we're just simply applying it to the merits of The Hangover. If this were Groundhog Day, I would have a lot more to say on the novelty of the movie. Groundhog Day is a comedy. I think if you put... What's another really kind of novelistic comedy that I could really point to? I suppose you could say Animal House.
Yeah.
Was kind of a trailblazer in that capacity. The Odd Couple, maybe.
Yep.
When Harry Met Sally. Like, those movies I would have a different level of reverence for as far as what they were accomplishing and how different they were from their peers. But The Hangover was at the tail end of the frat raunchy era. And while it was different because it was kind of a mystery movie that was also funny, it still is recycling a lot of the same humor from before. Todd Phillips led off the R-rated comedy boom with Old School, and then he kind of ended it with The Hangover.
Let's go streaking. Same thing.
Kind of. So, you're okay with Vertigo 1, Bridge 2, Hangover 3?
Yes, I think that's accurate.
So Vertigo then has won 2 out of the first 3 categories here for the purposes of our tiebreaker. We'll add up all the points as we kind of go along before we get to the end of it, but we'll take our second break, and we'll be right back. Before we jump back into the episode, and before we get to the Stanley Rubric in a minute, if you're ever curious about our Master Greatest Movies of All Time list that has every graded movie we've ever discussed on the show, there's a link in the episode description of every episode of this show, or you can go to RonnieDuckettStudios.com and find us the top entry on the Greatest Movie of All Time podcast show page. That has the grades we've done so far for all 283 movies we've graded, and we continue to add more each week. Make sure to check that out as we go and follow along. Dad, do we have anyone to remember this week?
Tom Kane, 64, American voice actor. Powerpuff Girls. Star Wars, The Wild Thornberrys. And Barry W. Blaustein, 71, American screenwriter. Coming to America, The Nutty Professor, and film director, Beyond the Mat.
He also wrote for Saturday Night Live, which I think is where he got his original start, writing primarily for Eddie Murphy, which then it makes sense that he would do Coming to America and The Nutty Professor from there.
So that would have been Wave 2, which would have been the early 80s.
Yeah. And Tom Kane, I can't easily recall exactly what voices that he did, but the Powerpuff Girls was on Cartoon Network, the Wild Thornberrys on Nickelodeon when I was growing up. Not two shows that I was very involved in, but were decently popular, and, you know, I can't say anything difficult against either of them, for that matter.
Sure.
And so we remember these here fondly for their contributions with a moment of silence in their honor. Thank you. Okay, we left off at Classicness. This is a category that has technically moved the baseline down since we last talked about any of these movies. It seems like every category has changed in some capacity. And that's been...
we evolve.
Yeah. I understand. I'm not, like, saying that what we did was problematic in any way. I'm just... It seems to be a common theme tonight. I have no idea where to rank these, but I would say that The Hangover has to be last, only because the other two have the benefit of timelessness, and it does not.
Correct. And I have a feeling that there are some of the jokes and some of the things that were done in that film that are not going to hold up over the long haul.
I don't know if I have any great concept on what will separate Vertigo versus The Bridge on the River Kwai. Neither is a particularly diverse film, but you wouldn't expect it to be in the late 50s. Story about war, or a story about obsession.
Yeah.
I don't know. Where are you thinking?
I would assume that obsession has more poignancy to today and into the future than does war necessarily. I think war is becoming more obsolete as time goes by. It's proving to be rather ineffectual.
Can I make a counterfactual just for the sake of throwing something out there?
All right.
The Bridge on the River Kwai takes place during war, but I think it has more to do about rule following and people following process and being so caught up in the process that you lose the forest for the trees. And if you're looking at a political situation and you're applying the lessons of this movie and what it's about more broadly, you could say that the people that are caught up in the process of, well, the rules say you can't do this, you can't make a $1 billion slush fund to pay out people who tried to overthrow the government. Why? You just can't do that. And then they get so caught up in it that the other people disobey the rules and they can just kind of do what they want because they're more concerned with being right on principle than they are about doing the actual right thing. Now, in this movie, it's much more convoluted as to what the actual right thing is or not until the ending, where he clearly makes the wrong decision. But up until that point, I think you straddled the line between whether or not he's doing something for a greater good or a greater purpose. I don't know. I'm trying to at least make a counterfactual that says we shouldn't look at it so cleanly as just about being about war.
I understand your point, and I know. Kind of. Pretty sure I understand what you're trying to get at, and I'm trying to figure out how to frame it myself.
I'll just say this is likely the category that decides who ends up winning the tiebreaker.
I think Kwai is more about men within confinement and what they do and how you get caught up in what would be, I guess, the term that was coined by, I'm drawing a blank as to the professor at Harvard. He's the one who coined the term groupthink, where one person throws out something and then everybody around them convinces themselves that this is the right thing to do, which in this particular case, Nicholson is trying to, hey, if we reestablish discipline, then we will be able to maintain our self-respect as soldiers, even though we're in captivity. And they've convinced themselves that that was more important than what was, in essence, assisting the enemy. Now, I understand it, and I guess that's the point. Whether that consideration versus the psychological aspect, obsession, addiction, because that's really what we're talking about. You almost become addicted to the feeling.
Yeah.
Which is more prevalent.
So a movie about rules and rule following and blindly going along with leaders versus a movie about addictive qualities in a romantic relationship or just addictive tendencies and a general obsession. I don't know. I think both are pretty good. Take your pick, I guess.
Yeah.
All right. So what would be your one then?
I guess I got to go Vertigo.
Okay. I'm just going to defer to you on it.
All right. It's close, but I think that's the one I'd have to go with.
That's fine. I understand. So that would be Vertigo 1, The Bridge on the River Kwai 2, and The Hangover 3 for Classicness. Which I think that's the third different category we've had in that exact same order out of 4 so far.
Yeah.
Okay. Rewatchability, though. You have a 2-hour hazy, dreamlike movie that is tough to digest, is more elusive and abstract, versus I'm trying to think of what the overall timing on that would be. I know it's 2 hours and like 40 minutes, but I'm trying to add all of that together. What is that, 160 minutes? 160-minute war film that really has not a lot of people shooting at each other and is about rule following or not rule following and general principles of decent decorum during war, versus hour and 40-minute movie that, while you may know the answer to the ultimate end of the movie, is shorter, is snappier, it has better dialogue. You know it's going to end well as opposed to the other two that end in death. I'm going to vote The Hangover number 1 here. I'm sorry. I just am.
Yeah.
If I went out on the street and asked the general person right now, living.
I know. I think rewatchability would... I think you're right. I mean, okay. I, being the historian, always gravitate towards the historical film. But still, no, I understand. I'm a unicorn at times.
No, you're just a boomer dad. You're a boomer dad. You like World War II stuff. It's okay. You can admit to it. Now, I'm going to defer to you. On the other two, I assume that you feel that The Bridge on the River Kwai is more accessible, easier to watch, more entertaining, more rewatchable.
Correct.
I would probably agree after this most recent watch through of all 3 films. So we're okay with Hangover 1, Bridge 2, Vertigo 3. All right, and then for audience score on this one, we had The Bridge on the River Kwai did change slightly. We had only been incorporating the Rotten Tomato scores from the first season, and that still stayed at a 93%, but it's an 86% for Google users for an 8.95. For Vertigo, we had a 92% for Rotten Tomato users and an 83% for Google users, giving us an 8.75. And The Hangover came in third on this category with 84% for Rotten Tomato users, 86% for Google users for an 8.5. Which I find a little bit surprising, but okay. The final breakdowns on these. Legacy rankings, we had Vertigo 1, Bridge 2, Hangover 3. Impact and Significance rankings, we had Bridge 1, Hangover 2, Vertigo 3. Novelty rankings, Vertigo 1, Bridge 2, Hangover 3. Classicness was Vertigo, Bridge, Hangover. Rewatchability was Hangover, Bridge, Vertigo. Audience score was Bridge, Vertigo, Hangover. Now, do you have a prediction or a guess as to how they finished here?
Vertigo, Bridge, Hangover.
That's what I would have thought too. Vertigo placed in the most total number 1 slots. But in total points, The Bridge on the River Kwai had only 10, and Vertigo had 11. And its fewest amount of total points in the rankings. So The Bridge on the River Kwai actually won the tiebreaker Vertigo is number 2. The Hangover is 3.
Okay.
And The Hangover, despite finishing in third on a lot of these categories, and to be fair, there were 6 categories, so you could have had a maximum of 18 points. It had 15 points overall and did at least win one category, that being rewatchability. But 15 isn't bad, and only 4 off of the pace, so 1 point difference, 1 point separation, and the final tiebreaker is Bridge, Vertigo, Hangover. So, if you thought this endeavor was entirely stupid, if you think that deciding between 3 movies, 2 of which probably should have been in the same category, and a third one that really probably shouldn't have been, but it was an interesting exercise nonetheless, at least in my mind. If you have commentary or otherwise, please write us at greatestalltimemmoviepodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on any of our socials at GMOAT Podcast, or you can write us on our website, ryanduncanstudios.com/GMOAT Podcast, and tell us all about it. But how did you think this went for our first attempt or foray at a tiebreaker in like 2 years?
Well, kind of like season 1. Kind of slowly inching our way onto the ice.
Okay. I don't think there's anything in here that I feel that badly about.
No.
I think ultimately most of the general population would probably agree with our rankings system. So I guess we'll let the chips fall where they may. People enjoy these tiebreaker episodes. I think we have one more planned this season. And next year, I don't think we have any planned, but we could figure something out. Or redux, fit them in it for episodes where like nobody's on that week and we can just... It was a weaker movie or something. I don't know. I think everybody was scared to come on this episode because they didn't want to watch 3 movies.
Yeah. It was quite a bit.
Well, for us, watching it in like the week span that we had, yeah. But whatever. Remaining thoughts then for the week.
I think I had talked about the fact that my show's coming out
June 8th.
June 8th. And I do have the name, Sidebar.
So that was the popular favorite?
That seemed to be the one that people seemed to gravitate towards. I had several names that I had figured or thought of, and it came down to about 3, and then I had people looking at those, and that's the one people seemed to, so, but yes.
Okay, then. Sidebar with Dana on June 8th, roughly at 11 a.m. Central if you're doing it live, and if not, he still hasn't talked to me about any of the logistics or...
It will be taken care of. It's on my list.
Uh-huh. Okay. Why do I feel like this is just yet another albatross for me?
No. I got it.
Me subsidizing yet another project for you?
Yeah. So, all right.
Okay. As far as me, I'm starting a law, literature, and film class coming up, and I guess our first selection is going to be a movie we're covering next year, To Kill a Mockingbird, with Gregory Peck. It's been a long time since I've seen it. It was one of the few books in high school that I really enjoyed that I didn't feel was too artsy.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to be glad to return to it, but I think I'm going to have a large selection of classic legal dramas that we're going to probably go through. I'm curious to see what books she has us read, and if any of them are John Grisham.
Grisham was not really a practicing lawyer for very long.
Okay. So?
Well, I'm not necessarily clear as to always how legally accurate some of his portrayals are.
Okay, that could be something to critique on your new show, Sidebar.
Yes, it could very well be.
That's what they call a comeback. But that looks like a good place to end it for this week. Thank you for listening. I do wish we could chat longer, but I'm having an old friend for dinner. Next week, for our 314th episode, we discuss The Rock from 1996, celebrating its 30th anniversary. Directed by Michael Bay, written by David Weisberg, Douglas S. Cook, and Mark Rosner. Cinematography by John Schwartzman, music by Nick Glennie Smith and Hans Zimmer. Editing by Richard Francis Bruce, starring Sean Connery, Nicolas Cage, Ed Harris, and David Morse. You won't want to miss that one, so watch ahead of the show by searching the Real Good app to find where it's streaming for you. That's REELGOOD. Please like, follow, rate, and review, or whatever on whichever platform you have so that more can join in our fun. You can also email the show at RonnieDuckinStudios.com or at GreatestAllTimeMoviePodcast@gmail.com, or find us on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Letterboxd, or TikTok at the handle at GMOAT Podcast. The Greatest Movie of All Time is a production of Ronnie Duncan Studios. Our show is mixed, edited, and written by Thomas Duncan. Our music is thanks to Purple Planet Music. Our distributor is Captivate FM. Our technical provider is Riverside FM.